Stephen Mansfield, New York Times bestselling author and speaker.
Doug Nicolle, I'm the creator of Earthworm Jim.
Tweet groups.
I'm Victor Dweck.
Joseph Carter, I'm the Mink Man.
This is Dave Baker from Forged in Fire.
This is Leah Morgan. I'm a comedian, and this is why you should never
Not ever.
Don't waste your time.
Oh, you really should.
listen to those darling, yummy Reverend and the Reprobate.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Reverend and the Reprobate. I'm Lucas Pinkard. I'll be the Reverend today, and with me is Dan Gibson, the
Reprobate. Hey,
Reprobate.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? Subscribe, like our stuff.
Hey, how's your mom?
Mom's doing good.
Yeah. So she's been moved from maximum security facility
To Midlothian.
Yeah, well done, Majin. So getting a little loving for good behavior.
Yep.
Which is nice.
She's getting the ramen packets that we've been sending.
Wow, that's good
Yeah,
news.
they use it for lots of things.
Right, sure. Yeah,
You
they
can-
don't
you
actually
can-
use the ramen. They use the packets for lots
The
of
packets,
things.
yeah, the flavoring.
Yeah. Yep.
You can make tea out of it. You can use it. You know they make it in the toilets, right?
Right. Yeah.
You can make like ramen flavored wine.
Oh wow.
There's not a whole lot of uses for it. But they make do in prison.
So on today's show, we have the very talented Ethan Nicolle, who is the creative director for the Babylon Bee. We're going to talk about all this stuff whenever we actually intro Ethan.
Yeah.
He's going to tell us about the inspiration for his book, Brave Ollie Possum. Talk to us a little bit about Audio Mullet, his podcast that he did with Doug Nicolle and Mike J. Nelson, who is one of the voices that you will hear if you're familiar with Mystery Science Theater 3000, who's a good friend of Ethan's. He talks to us about his new project with GK Chesterton called Chesterton's Gateway, which is a new collection of essays that he's curated and illustrated.
Axe Cop.
We get into a lot of stuff.
My favorite topic.
About Axe Cop, and I think that there is so much more, a great controlled writing segment. Thanks, Ethan, for coming on the show, and thank you guys for watching. Make sure, if you like this video, that you like, subscribe, ding the little bell, follow us if you're listening to us on podcast, and remember, as Danny likes to say, if you don't like it, you can always
unlike it later.
You can always
just
unlike it later.
Like it up front. If you don't like it later, you can unlike it. But go ahead and do it now.
Right now.
Yeah, cover my Cheetos.
We're gonna wait. You can go ahead and we're gonna wait for you to do it. Hey, remember when you unplugged the camera so you could plug your phone in? We almost didn't get this episode done. Reverend and the Reprobate, Ethan Nicolle. Do it. Danley Expo today on these fabulous airwaves. We have not only the creator of Axe Cop, the fabulously talented creative director of the Babylon Bee, the author and illustrator of Brave Ollie Possum, but he is also the pride of Coos Bay, Oregon. It is the wonderfully talented and dashingly handsome Ethan Nicolle. How are you, Mr. Nicolle?
Hello there. Thanks for having me, gentlemen.
What? You know what? That's fabulous.
Yeah.
I've never been introduced as dashingly handsome.
Well,
It's new.
It's true. It's true. Look at you. Your beard's in good shape. Your beard is good. We like your beard.
You don't have any
Thank
Cheeto
you.
dust on you like I do.
No. So I've got a handful of questions. We've got a lot of mutual friends. It seems like our orbits have kind of circled each other, not just with comedians, but also with guys like Steve Ryder, who have had a ton of really positive things to say about you. I don't know if you saw Kira Davis today was trying to one-up you, saying that we had her on our show before we had you on our show. We've had her on twice, and she was like, just make sure that Ethan knows I've been on their show twice before he got on there once. So
We also had Seth Dillon on.
yeah, we did have Seth Dillon.
Oh, really?
on.
Which, by the way, does he smell wonderful?
Oh yeah, he's
But
like he's like a cinnamon apple dipped in the salty brine of the ocean.
I guessed cinnamon
We
earlier.
did guess cinnamon.
I said sandalwood and cinnamon would be my guess.
That's good. Yeah, sandalwood and cinnamon.
So like when
freaking nailed it.
When Seth sits down,
Hint of Old Spice.
and his wallet is in his back pocket, how many millimeters do you think that wallet gives him in cushion to where he actually looks taller whenever he sits because of just the sheer girth of the liquid
looks like-
assets?
He looks like a toddler in a high chair because he has one wallet in each back pocket. It's like butt stilts. You can actually walk on them like those creatures in the Dark Crystal.
Hey, I was happy to get a Dark Crystal reference out of this.
Is this the original or the
It
reboot?
came out. I never watched the reboot.
Okay.
You know those ones that are big stilt creatures?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
They do that. They run.
All right.
Sorry, I'm bumping the mic now.
No, we've got so many things to ask you about. I've been a fan of yours for years. Started off with Axe Cop. You have actually done some art for my wife and I. It's in the cover of our Brave Ollie Possum book. When we ordered it. Yeah, absolutely. So this is actually my second copy of Brave Ollie Possum that I've got here. We gave the first one away.
It wasn't for me, but I got to see it too.
Yeah, so
you get to touch it.
So
yeah.
one of the cool things that Ethan does for those of you at home is this is some hand-drawn art that he did in the front of our Brave Ollie Possum book. My wife and I, when we got married, one of the first things that we started, because it was during COVID, was that we would read a book together every night. And we started off with some stuff that was, very spiritual, like with Charles Spurgeon stuff. And then we decided we wanted to do something fun. And I had heard of Ethan's new book, Brave Ollie Possum. It is absolutely phenomenal. I don't have enough good things that I can say about this book. I've given away probably 7 copies.
You gave one to me.
To friends and family members. Yeah, gave one to Danley. What inspired Brave Ollie Possum? This is kind of where I want to start. Is you've done a ton of different stuff. What inspired you to do a children's book? Because everything else you've done is sort of in a different realm. What made you want to do this, and why a possum as your main character?
Well, first of all, that project is so close to my heart. So hearing that, it's just been like so thrilling to read people's reviews and see people find it. I never thought it would find an audience. I've been blessed to have come to the Babylon Bee, which has helped me find an audience for the book. Through that, I think has really helped. So going back, for one thing, my favorite animal when I was a kid was a possum. We were going to be moving from Colorado to Oregon, so I got a book of Oregon animals, and the first animal I locked in on was the possum, and I couldn't wait to see a real possum when we got to Oregon. So I actually, when we were driving and moving to Oregon, the first thing I saw, the first roadkill I saw was a possum when we were going on a trip for Thanksgiving. So on that Thanksgiving trip around the dinner table, everybody's kind of taking this really spiritual moment and going, what do we want to thank God for? We'll go around in a circle in prayer. And God, everyone's saying for a free country and for Jesus's sacrifice. And it gets to me and I'm 8, and I'm like, I thank God that I saw a dead possum in the road over here. So I've always had an obsession with possums. Nobody's really done the possum story, the quintessential, when you think the possum movie or story. I can't think of one. And then I was binging Roald Dahl, so when I got married, my wife had 2 children from her previous marriage. So I became instant bedtime story guy. And I started binge reading to these kids all these books I'd missed out on, all the classic Grimm's fairy tales and Alice in Wonderland, Wizard of Oz, The Hobbit. I just started digging all these books out and falling in love with them. And then Roald Dahl, I'd never really gotten into, Matilda, BFG, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. And I was just when I read Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, the first, I don't know how many chapters before they actually get to the factory, the whole golden ticket thing. The way that they were glued to that story, I was so excited by it. And the way they're glued, the way that the end of the BFG affected them. I started kind of gathering up the elements that make a great bedtime story. One thing, it's not short, it's epic, because it's fun to come back and get a new chapter every night. The chapters are short. There's characters with fun voices to do. It's scary, but not too scary. It's also lighthearted and silly, and also really gross sometimes. So I just kind of took all these elements. I really love the transformation aspect of going to a different world, a human becoming an animal, that kind of stuff. It was fun to go into a different world, come back. So these are all things I really wanted to work in. And in my binge of Roald Dahl, I was really inspired after. It really is honestly a combination of Fantastic Mr. Fox meets The Witches. So in The Witches, there's always witches, and this kid turns into a mouse. And then Fantastic Mr. Fox has this whole world of all these animals, even the movie more so, which is, I think it was great, even though the book's a really short book. But so it was really combining those 2 worlds, and they get kind of the feeling that I got from the 2 of them into this, and then also basing it on classic fairy tales. So I wanted to have a lot of classic fairy tale stuff to it. So there's no modern technology in it. The monster lady is just this lady with a shack out in the woods that likes to eat children. Classic. So yeah, that's it.
Do you end up telling people, with your love for the possum, do you end up telling people, because I hear a lot, there's a possum and I got to kill it, unless they're, harassing animals or something, that they're really kind, docile creatures that look really terrifying because when they're scared, they hiss or they play dead. Do you end up trying to encourage people to leave possums alone?
Yeah, I mean, I don't get too worked up. I understand they are giant rats, and I know my love for them is unique. Recently, we got home from what were we at? We were out of the house all day doing something. We came home, and all of a sudden, my daughter, my 7-year-old daughter, comes running, shrieking with fear in her eyes, like, "The dogs are attacking something in the living room." We found she found Chip in there, shaking some kind of creature by its neck in the living room. And our dog, our little Chihuahua-sized dog, was shaking a baby possum around by its neck. Oh, no. And I don't know how long this thing had been in there being roughed up by my two, dogs who had never attacked another animal in their life. Like, this is their first rodeo with, being red in tooth and claw or whatever. So, but then I was, all excited because it didn't seem, there's no broken skin or anything. It did seem really, just kind of PTSD from the experience. So I'm like, this will be my pet. I will name it Ollie. And I bought all this stuff, bought this exotic possum food from this shady website, and I got all this stuff together. And then within 24 hours, it died. So I guess Chip pulled it off. Chip pulled it off. He killed Ollie Possum.
Poor Ollie.
That's too bad.
We had a possum that we caught that had been eating our baby chicks that we also named Ollie.
That's kind of what I was referencing.
Yeah, and I tweeted it at Ethan, and he liked it. And that was the first time when I was like, okay, if Ethan is liking my tweets, then maybe a year from now we can get him on the show, and that's about what happened.
Hold on. Point of order. There was one movie I can think of that has possums in it. Have you seen the Goofy movie?
Yes, but that's not about a possum.
No, it's not. They do make a stop at Lester's Possum Park.
They're in stuff, yeah. Yeah, they're in stuff. They're secondary characters usually.
Yeah.
Yeah, but not anymore. So in the book Brave Ollie Possum, you did talk a little bit about how each of these great children's books has an element of kind of grossness to it, which we see in different things, especially that the Glorch does, which is our villain in the book. We also get to see how the possum is the worst possible thing that Ollie can become, because Ollie is very, very afraid. Mm-hmm. And when a possum becomes afraid, it immediately becomes rigid. Was that something in the story, as you kind of tell this story about Ollie overcoming his fears, was that something that you wrote specifically for your kids, with them in mind, and overcoming fears? And what did that look like as a dad to get to write that kind of book?
Yeah, my stepson was going through a time where he was really scared at night. He was wanting to come sleep in our bed a lot, and I went through a phase like that really bad when I was a kid. Right after my parents divorced, when I was about 7 or 8, we immediately, me and my mom, my dad went homeless, and my mom moved us into low-income housing in kind of a shady neighborhood. The first night we lived there, somebody broke into our car and stole everything out of it.
Oh, wow.
And I had never interacted with something like that in my life. Or it was just such a moment of a loss of innocence to realize there are people out there that are mean and just don't care. And to find that out at the moment that I also found out dads can leave and you can be alone without your dad. I went into probably a 2-year period of very bad nightmares and fear. And it was a slow process for me to figure out how to overcome that. And a lot of it was wrapped up in spirituality, especially as I got older and found my faith. But I think that, if we literally are just animals, if that's what people say we are as human beings, we're just some other version of a primate, then this world is terrifying. It's only not scary if there's an author of our life and he has a plan for us. I don't know how you don't live your life in fear if you literally think of yourself as some sort of little flea on a giant rotting orange that is the earth.
Yeah, you do make it a point, and I think that this is interesting. I know we've had the opportunity to talk with Doug Tadapel, who's a close friend of yours. You did some work together with him on Audio Mullet, which
by the way, when are we getting more Audio Mullet?
Yeah, absolutely. When is that gonna?
We need to do another episode. I think that once my kids get a little older, I'll be able to get because we were doing it on weekends and it was causing a lot of problems because my youngest son is a handful. My wife really needs my attention on the weekend help. And it had just kept happening that like when I would do an episode of that, it would be at the worst moment. He would like destroy the house or something. And then
That's when Calvin
I just had to give it up until, Calvin's a little more under control.
Yeah,
basically is what happened.
That's when Calvin is covering Legos in his feces and spreading them all over your upstairs room. Yeah,
exactly.
That has been one of my favorite parts of the Babylon Bee podcast is the Calvin updates that happen periodically. So you've taken a lot of different elements in the book Brave Ollie Possum and extrapolated them out to where not only is it a moral lesson that you teach, but talking about specifically your relationship with Doug. One of the things you said, I think you mentioned this in the episode you did of the Holy Smokes podcast with Steve Ryder, is you were talking about how Doug brings his faith to his comics in different and unique ways, and the way that he expresses them. And you do that a little bit in Brave Ollie Possum, because you talk about how Ollie is talking to God and praying to God, that he obviously has a relationship with God. He feels very free with that. And it is a book really at the center of it. Not only is it Ollie overcoming his fear, but it's this restoration of relationship with his parents. Why was that something that you wanted to put as what ends up being a very central theme of the book? And why do you think that's an important thing in a children's story?
I think, it's really about his relationship with his dad. And I think something I learned about my dad, who always loved us, and he always, he wanted to be a good dad, but he believed he was not a good dad. He believed that we were better off without him. And so he would sort of run away. And it was only through the woman that he ended up marrying who really kind of restored him in a lot of ways. And he had kids, and that's how I ended up with my little brother Malachi, who's 24 years younger than I am. But he wasn't abusive, and he wasn't mean, but because of his own fear, I inherited his fear. He passed his insecurities onto me because he didn't handle them himself. He was appointed by God to be a father, and I was his son, and my other two brothers are his sons. And he denied that call, and it cost not only him something, but it cost us something. God's put people in my life to fill that hole and be there for me. But it's a thing that I think, so in the story, Brave Ollie Possum, I really wanted to be, the dad in that story. He's so focused on fixing this sinking ship that is their failing restaurant that he has abandoned his son. And he thinks, he doesn't think that being a dad to his son is the important thing right now, or that that's not really his calling. So what it is to fix this sinking ship. And his son is feeling the loss of his father. And so I think that there's a rightness in the world when your parents accept the responsibility and calling to be your parent. I think that every human is meant to have somebody in their life that sees you as the center of their world in some way, as a child truly, and takes that position, even though for all of us it's really transcendent to be that and scary. When you don't have that, it is a version of that lost, flailing feeling that you have when, if there's no God, if there's no meaning,
I have absolutely loved all of the work that you've done, but you've really become, over the course of your career, if you were to look from the stuff that you did at the very, very beginning with some of the webcomics you've done to now Brave Ollie Possum, you've become a really phenomenal storyteller. And one of the things that I often see online is people try to critique some of your early work, especially the Axe Cop stuff, because it was stuff that you did with your little brother. And that he was he was in some ways, he was the chief storyteller, because if I remember the story,
so cool.
Yeah, if I remember the story correctly, this started when you had pitched some shows. You've had some things optioned by Cartoon Network. You're going home for Christmas, and you want to find a way to connect with your little brother. And he starts telling you about this toy he's got, or this game he plays, which is Axe Cop. which makes absolutely no sense, and yet has turned into this
I mean,
huge
Nick
comic
Offerman
franchise.
doing the voice
Nick
of
Offerman,
X-Cop.
Patton Oswalt was Sakurang. What was the genesis of X-Cop, if you can just tell our listeners that don't know, and then talk to us about how that blossomed and what you thought of that journey.
Well, I was visiting for Christmas, and I had always made it a point to visit my younger siblings. Ever since on the day that I graduated high school, my dad showed up with my new baby sister, who I'd never met yet. And that was a meaningful moment for me. And so I would try to visit them every 2 or 3 times a year, go up to Washington and see them. And Malachi was kind of a surprise because they had 2 girls back to back. And then about 6 years later, my dad's like in his 60s, they suddenly have a baby. And, or no, he was closer to 70, I think. Yeah.
Wow.
Or 65.
That's what's going to happen
66.
with Lucas.
Yeah, probably. Probably.
So I'm 24 or so, and that's when they have Malachi. So I'm like 29 when Axe Cop gets created. And I was like kind of burnt out I had moved to Hollywood. I had been there for a year. I had 2 shows optioned and nothing happened with them. I had found 2 well enough paying full-time jobs. One was at Disney, but it was just drawing these like English as a second language storybooks, just copying Disney characters and drawing them, and then animating math problems for this educational company. So miserable but well-paying jobs like in my field, but like the worst version of jobs in my field. So, and then those both laid me off in the same week. So I was actually like jobless. I had hit a dead end with my comics, and then I had just started working on this other comic called Barmageddon. But I was even burnt out on like trying with that. I was just like, so I went home on Christmas and I was like, I'm not going to draw. I'm not going to work on these comics. I need to take a break, be with my family. And when Malachi started saying, will you play Axe Cop with me? I immediately got the visual of Axe Cop in my head. Just the whole character design was there. He just meant, will you play cops? But he didn't have a toy gun. He had a toy axe from some firefighter day that he went on. They give you a kit of fireman toys, you know? So finally I go, all right, sure, yeah, what do I be? And he just pulls out another toy. It's a flute. It's actually a recorder, but I go, what is this? What am I, flute cop? And he's like, yeah. And then we just start playing. And the whole playtime is literally the first comic. If you look up Axe Cop, I just had to draw it. It was a moment where like, I go, you know what? I'm going to draw this. It's so funny, and I want to remember it, and it's so stupid. I'm going to draw it really sloppy. So I really cranked it out sloppy. I didn't do any reference work on the dinosaurs or Axe Cop's outfit. His hat looks like this weird nurse hat. I just like threw it down. But I was loving it so much. Over that stay, I did like 4 of them with him. I just kept turning our play times. We'd play, and then I would quiz him. I'd ask him all these questions as if I was a documentarian filling in the gaps of the story. And just questioning, and then I'd hold him accountable to his logic. If he said, if blood gets on a character, that changes them. So anytime blood got somewhere, we had to, I'd hold him to his rules, and it started creating a universe very rapidly. And I was up at night drawing these, just the pure joy of it, no Hollywood in mind, just like loving it, and my whole family loved them. In my mind, Axe Cop was for me and my family. I didn't think that other people would think it was as funny because it's my little brother, not theirs, Mm-hmm. So I just thought it was like, look, showing people your baby pictures out of your wallet, it's cute for me, you don't care. So we created the Axe Cop website with a friend of mine who loved him, and we did it as a test run because we were going to launch the Barmageddon webcomic, and I wanted a rough draft of just like, how do I present a webcomic? So we just kind of threw Axe Cop together as a test, and I was going to share it with friends and family and maybe update it whenever I made a new Axe Cop comic with Malachi. And then that was basically like 2 days later, it was kind of quietly online for like 2 days, and then something happened and it went viral, and it was just insane. Like it was the website of the day on Entertainment Weekly the next morning, and I was getting tweets from like crazy people. I mean, like Simon Pegg and everybody at Riff Tracks and Mystery Science Theater.
Wow.
I mean, who's that singer? Rob, is anyone here?
Zombie?
Rob, yeah, anyway.
Rob Thomas.
Matchbox 20.
Yeah, Rob
that guy,
Thomas.
people are mentioning it like in pop culture. Like, it was just crazy. Like, it was like as if you're watching TV and then all of a sudden the characters acknowledge you that you're watching them. That's how it felt like on Twitter. All these big accounts I'd been following, suddenly they were talking to me. So it was a crazy experience. It ended up being we ended up doing a 6-book deal with Dark Horse. It was like we did 3 2-book deals basically with Dark Horse Comics, and I started going out to Washington when I'd spend a month at a time, and we'd write these epics together, and then we ended up doing that TV show with Fox. It was on late night.
Yeah, so we've got all 6 volumes of it are right here just above our sacred text of the Babylon Bee. We've got all 6 of those. Flute Cop is a really bizarre character because Flute
And it
Cop,
makes more sense now.
well, but Flute Cop also has like 6 iterations. He's Flute Cop, he becomes Avocado Cop. So with the rules that you're holding Malachi to, how difficult was that to keep him following the rules with these characters? And then, you said you went away and then you would come back. How do you jump back into the story where you left off in order to try to create continuity? Because the books flow really well from one to the other. And that seems like it'd be a difficult task with a young brother, trying to rein him back in and be like, no, remember, he's an avocado now. And he's like,
we're not playing Ninja Turtles right now. We're playing Axe Cop.
I'm tired of him being an avocado. I want him to be a bird. Yeah.
Well, that was the thing when we play. He would let me be Axe Cop, and so I would basically stay Axe Cop most of the time unless he suggested a way. Like sometimes for a finishing move, Axe Cop will pour blood on him and turn into something to kill the bad guy.
Right.
Like he turned into like a lava bowl at some point, I think. But yeah, so he usually would be Flute Cop, and that's why he changes so often, because his short attention span, But my basic writing process with Malachi was like we would play, go crazy. I'd just note anything funny, anything that was working, and whatever the basic conflict was. And then we started doing, when I really needed a complex story, we would do good guy days and bad guy days. So we do days where after we'd established some of the storyline, I'd go, okay, now today we're going to pretend to be the bad guys. And that make the bad guys way more scary, because suddenly he's taking their role and he's talking about how he's going to kill Axe Cop. And then they become way harder to defeat. And so I'm trying to do this push and pull between those. And it's a lot of role playing. And then after I do all the role playing, I piece out what we have on a plot, and I find all the gaps. And I just start asking them questions to fill in those gaps until I get something that works. Or I've taken so many notes from so many questions. We've done all these Ask Axe Cop questions. We have notebooks full of answers to those that haven't been used in comics. And sometimes I'll go back through those and go, this might fit in this gap. And I'll just basically this patchwork of his brain into a story. So it's kind of this weird ransom note story, sort of way of piecing together his brain into different storylines.
Well, I can think of no better way or nothing I've seen of relating to, as an adult with a much younger brother, of relating by storytelling. And I've heard you mention, you were talking to Doug Tenaple on one of the Audio Mullet podcasts of, the story with your dad, how he left and he felt like he was a failure, but that one of your favorite memories with him was his stories, how he would make up stories on the spot. So I am curious, with you crafting this story with his son, how did that go with your dad at the time? What kind of growth did you see with your relationship?
My dad was getting pretty old by the time Axe Cop hit. He was slowing down, so he didn't get involved much. He just didn't have Malachi was just his wild kid, just running around, bouncing off. When we'd do these stories, he would be running around the room as he talked. So my dad just loved it, though. He ate it. And it had to be like amazing for him to be watching his offspring of so far apart, 24 years apart, creating this thing together. And then suddenly we're, being flown out to Comic-Con as special guests. There's like a giant balloon of Axe Cop over one of the parking lots. We're doing a giant panel. Just wild, to see the two of us up there together. And I think he loved it. He always wore an Axe Cop shirt all the time. He would tell everybody about it. Yeah, that was one of the funniest things, Axe Cop. He's on the plane to San Diego Comic-Con. Everybody on the plane's going there. Yeah. And he's, most of the people on the plane are like, that's the Axe Cop kid. But because this is like at the height, But he's turning around and going around to everybody, hey, have you heard of Axe Cop? This is my son's made it.
I can only imagine how proud, putting myself in his shoes of seeing, like you said, his two offspring taking up the mantle of storytelling in a way to relate to each other, because it's really cool. Follow-up question. Did you always envision Nick Offerman doing the voice of Axe Cop? Was there no question, or was there several that you had in mind?
I didn't have, so I admittedly was not a big Parks and Rec guy, but I had been told by many people like, oh, this Nick Offerman, the guy that plays Ron Swanson, he's got to do Axe Cop.
Yeah.
And he had been getting a lot of people telling him the same thing. So when he reached out, I was like, I should watch that show then if he wants to talk to me.
He reached out to you.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So, yeah, that was crazy. So like we ended up meeting up for lunch at a place, and we just met at this pastrami restaurant, and he was wearing like a snow cap and shades kind of to hide his identity because he was shooting Parks and Rec, so he had the mustache and everything. Mm-hmm. But yeah, we just met up, and we at that point it was just we wanted to do something together. He loves Axe Cop, wants to do something Axe Cop. We hadn't determined what, and then it was a few months later that Fox was launching ADHD, and the team there, the main people there, had come from Adult Swim at Cartoon Network. They knew they wanted Axe Cop. We had turned down what they had offered at Cartoon Network, a more of a children's show version. Just wasn't a good deal, and I knew they were going to change it so much. It shouldn't be a kids show; it wouldn't make sense. Yeah. So when they moved over and started ADHD, they came back and I said, "Hey, I got this new company. They're willing to be really flexible on deals because it's brand new, so they're not going to take all your rights and things. It'll just be a license to make a show, and we can kind of make it more adult. However, it's just fit the way the comic does it, and which is funny because it's written by a 5-year-old, but all the violence of a 5-year-old's mind, and Nick Offerman off the bat was the voice because they had already determined he'll be the guy with the axe.
Of course, there's no one else, in my opinion.
The other two big supportive actors at that time was Ken Marino had really wanted to be Axe Cop he like waited in line to meet me at Comic-Con one.
Wow!
And then Peter Serafinowicz, who does a bunch of voices in the show. They both have been talking to me for a long time. So Nick got the spot, but those other two guys have done a ton of voices in the show. And they were all three huge Axe Cop fans.
Well, it's a funny show, and
it is. It's great.
The story behind it really is it's like a golden, heartwarming story.
Yeah, and I can't imagine it being on something like Cartoon Network because Axe Cop.
No, it's not feather duster cop.
No, and Axe Cop's whole thing is that he chops everybody's head off. Like that's how he solves all the world's problems. And so you can't work that into Ed, and Eddie or Dexter's Laboratory. Dexter can't be chopping people's heads off.
Maybe Rick and Morty, but this predated that.
Yeah, yeah. So
he was raised eating babies too.
This is true. So there's a lot of stuff in the Axe Cop universe, and I don't think Wexter would have fit well in there, which is the T-Rex with giant M134A machine gun arms, which I think is also a brilliant addition. So Axe Cop is really what kind of brought you into the foray. Then you move into Barmageddon. I want to talk a little bit about your book, Bears Want to Kill You, which
I don't.
Which was because it terrifies you?
Yeah.
Yeah. Because it was your first crowdfunded project, if that's correct. What was that experience like? How did you get Bears Want to Kill You off the ground? And now that you've done the second printing, I've got 2 copies of it here. I got my hardcover, and then I've got our paperback back here, which I've got some excerpts that I want to read to you, and I want to know what some of the inspiration was.
Can I have the
behind
soft copy?
No, you can't.
Can I have my Cheetos back?
You can't have anything. So what was it that made you want to go the crowdfunding route, and what was that experience like?
So my comic Barmageddon, which is still close to my heart. I mean, I love it. It's like my Edgar Wright movie. I want to make this slacker horror comedy about bears. And I actually am still working on it quietly. It's not updating on the site at the moment, but I still plan to finish it. So every week, at least once a week, I'll work on panels. But the tough thing about a comic like that is nothing can go viral, and it's a continuing, one page at a time. Nobody's going to share one page, and then that'll get shared a bunch. So trying to get people to discover it. When I was really updating it regularly, I was trying to be strategic about how to get people to kind of find it. And so I started doing these bear memes just kind of as a way to try to create a brand of Barmageddon. So I created Barmageddon News Network and basically created the onion of bear news. And I think that Babylon Bee had just come out. And I remember telling my buddy who made the website with me, just copy the Babylon Bee but make it bears. and I'll write all the articles and do all the photoshops. And so I just started putting out one article a day on that. And some of them just went so crazy viral. And some of them made front page of Reddit. And then a lot of those images I make, like kind of the diagrams of bear attacks and stuff, have been just robbed and like shared by all these giant accounts, and they've had just gazillions of views. And luckily I put my logo on all that, and that was the goal, is just for it to spread and get some recognition there. And I don't know how many people that got over to the comic, but so I wanted to make a Kickstarter for Barmageddon, because it's going to be a fully epic. I was thinking about doing in multiple volumes, so I was going to do volume 1. But I was really nervous because I would be heartbroken and I might not finish Barmageddon if the Kickstarter failed. So I really wanted to do something that I wasn't as close to my heart. I wanted to do something I could just do is dip my toes in crowdfunding. And I had all this bear meme stuff I'd been working on for the year. And so I knew I could crank that book out. I already had like probably a third of it done on the website, and I could crank the rest out. So I decided kind of as just same thing. Axe Cop was kind of a test run for webcomics. This was my test run for a crowdfunding, and it did great. I mean, it made, I think my like 3 times what I was trying to get, and it's my first hardcover book I've ever had published in my life, because none of my publishers have ever done that. So, yeah, really thrilling and fun to have a book that's my own, and I love selling it. If you buy that book on Amazon or from my site, they all come from me. So, anytime if you bought Bears Want to Kill You, it came from my garage. I packaged it up for you, and I put a stamp on it. If you got a signed one, I signed it. So, there's probably some little bits of cigar and stuff in there.
There's a Rocky Patel just stashed in the back of one of them.
Yeah. These little brown flakes, that's cigar chunks.
Make sure you give the box a good sniff.
Yeah. So I did have to say,
patina.
I loved the packaging. I loved the stamp that was on it. One of my favorite sections, and this, if you're reading along at home with your copy of Bears Want to Kill You, if you don't have one, you can go down to the show notes, buy one, purchase it on Amazon or through the Axe Bear store, and get one immediately, and then you can restart this podcast from here. On page 128, Bear Scams and Propaganda. Bear propaganda has invaded many cultures, from fabric softener to honey bottles to toilet paper commercials. Bears are portrayed as soft, cuddly, and fun to snuggle with. Then we're going to skip down. Below are some of the most popular ways bears use propaganda to coax us into naive complacency and make us more vulnerable to bear attacks. Just about every page of this book has made me crack up, but this section in particular, teddy bears, gummy bears, sports teams, gay culture, and the favorite bear claws. Like, how do you come up with this stuff?
It's all bear related material, and it's a whole book.
Yeah.
Right, because it seems like that we've interviewed a lot of comics, and they're like, if you have a joke, you can use it for maybe 10 to 20 minutes. You have used it for over 300 pages. Like, how do you keep getting like consistently funny material out of bears? And bears even make an appearance in Axe Cop. The Bear Council is in, I believe it's season 2 of Axe Cop, which you can find on Hulu. So how does that happen?
I mean, yeah, it's just a matter of I started writing all these memes and jokes around bears, and it kind of created its own lore. So it kind of became, there is a backstory that you kind of start to sense as you read that bear book, that the bears are taking over. These are the things you can do. And it's like, I think that's funny about it is, I think what makes good comedy, which I think this is almost a law of comedy, like what makes a situation funny and comedic is when a character is determined to accomplish something that they clearly cannot accomplish. And that's slapstick in a nutshell. And so that's what Bears Want to Kill You is. It's like, it's a survival guide about a world where you will definitely die. And so I think there's always that element. There's a ridiculousness of just taking bears as far as they go. And, I think some people look at it and they go, it's a one-note joke. It's the same joke. And to me, like, that's it. Like, if you want if it appeals to you that I'm going to make these dumb bear jokes, and you just want a book where you can just, like, when you're in the mood, flip to a random page. And my goal is to have at least one funny thing on every page. So whatever page you flip to, you don't have to read the book in order. You can just pop into it, and it's just going to be funny. For me, that's it.
I can confirm. Earlier today, I was just flipping through it. Every page made me laugh out loud.
Yeah, and I will say to now, while you can order this on Amazon, if you go through the Axe Bear store, you do have some options, and Ethan will personalize some artwork for you. This was another part of the package that I got when I ordered Brave Ollie Possum and Bears Want to Kill You at the same time. He did the artwork in the front of Brave Ollie Possum, and also in there we get to add a little note to him, told him a little bit about our story, wrote us a very nice note, and the artwork is phenomenal. And this is going to be one of those things that we pass on, because Brave Ollie Possum is definitely going to be something that we read
until I steal it.
Yeah, until you steal it. That we read to our kids, because it's a great story. In Bears Want to Kill You, and when you were promoting Barmageddon, you sort of perfected the infographic. And this is going to bring us to a little bit about what you're doing now as sort of what I understand being your main gig is the stuff at the Babylon Bee. And the Babylon Bee, especially with the posters, I've got several of them hanging up in my office. So as people come into the pastor's office, they have the infographic for the proper way to worship, and the Christian hugs and how to do those things properly are prominently displayed above my desk that everybody sees whenever they come in. But the infographic has sort of become one of the signature things of the Bee. I want to know not only just how did you get started with the Babylon Bee, for those who haven't listened to the podcast, haven't heard this story, but how have you made sort of the infographic? It seems like a character in and of itself. Like, that's one of the things that I love the most about the Bee. How did that come about?
Yeah, I was working on Bears Want to Kill You when I came on at the Bee. And that happened through, I had been a fan of the Babylon Bee since I found it around 2016, 17. And I had sent a message or two to them and never gotten a response, just saying I would love to contribute jokes to this. It's it's singing my song over there. I finally one day, I think I saw this guy named Kyle Mann followed me on Twitter, and I noticed that he was the senior writer or something at the Babylon Bee. And so I messaged him and said, "Oh, I love the Babylon Bee," and he's like, "Oh, I love Axe Cop. That's why I followed you." So and then it just so happened that, and he was the head writer of most. He wrote probably 80% of the articles on Babylon Bee. He's a machine. He just happened to live 5 miles from me. And I was in this spot where I actually had not been, I had not really had work for a while. I had finished my 3 years at VeggieTales at DreamWorks, and I was doing odd jobs, but I really didn't have a steady job, and I wasn't sure what I was going to do next. And so it kind of became, I started doing articles and started doing some Photoshops here and there. And when Seth Dillon bought the Bee, they kind of started ramping things up, and they actually hired, I was basically the second full-time employee ever. Kyle was the first. And it started as me and Kyle in his garage, just figuring it out from there. And then we had a few guys writing from online, and we've been building it since then. So we're in a small studio space now. I think this is the third building we've been in. We went from his garage to a tiny office to now this little house, and we're getting ready now to move to somewhere bigger. So about a year ago, so when I first started, one of the first things I did was I was the Babylon Bee really needs the Babylon Bee book, that looks like a Bible and has just it has the images and the headlines, because that's what people want. And so I basically I had just finished my bear book, and using kind of the same spirit, I did the sacred text of the Babylon Bee. And so there's lots of infographics in there. I did a lot of kind of bonus jokes with all the photos and a lot of diagrams and stuff. And and so that was my vision was, how that book came out. And doing a lot of the infographics became a fun thing. They always did really well. I always did the really epic Photoshops. And then I started pitching the idea of animation. I really wanted to, we hadn't done any video, and we just kind of started dipping our toes. And we had the podcast. It was all audio. So about a year ago is when we all kind of dove into video, and we started doing video version of the podcast. And I started playing around with doing animation too. So, and then we started doing live sketches. And so this year's been kind of wild, because it was just a year ago we had nothing, and now if you look at our YouTube channel, it's wild what this tiny group here has created in a very that short amount of time. So it's been exciting, a lot of fun.
Well, we've got a lovely copy up front of the sacred text.
The sacred text of
Beautiful.
the Babylon Bee.
Yep. And
that cover, that was that thing of all the weird, indents and foils and things. It almost destroyed the publisher. It took them forever.
Well, there was a lot of work that went into this because if I remember correctly, you said on the podcast, which if you haven't listened to the Babylon Bee podcast, I would encourage anybody to do it. And I would even say it's one of those that you can go back to the very beginning. And while some of the news stories may not be as relevant as they once were, the interviews are phenomenal. Doing an audio medium, the stuff that you've done with Audio Mullet is very, very different than what you do with the Babylon Bee podcast. And I've really loved to hear, especially how your voice in interviews has matured as you've, decided that, not just to lean back, to really participate in the interviews a little bit more. I think in the beginning, you kind of let Kyle lead the way, and now you're asking a lot more questions, doing a lot more follow-up, which I think has been phenomenal because you guys think in such different ways. But with the sacred text of the Babylon Bee, one of the things you had said was the most difficult for you was going back and fixing all of the old Photoshops in order to get them into a format where they could be printed into the book. Now, how long did that process take?
I think it took me around 4 to 6 months to do that whole book. But I mean, I was working on it all day, every day for part of the time. And we were doing the podcast and Photoshops for the website and stuff like that as well. But yeah, so I'm pretty fast with Photoshop, and I was having to crank them out. So I was doing many a day. But yeah, you'll see. If you know the original Photoshops for those stories that were on the website, there's many in there that it's updated, and some of them I think are great upgrades. I'm like I love doing it, but yeah. So I'd turn them into, because I would want sometimes you want like a full page graphic. So I did a ton of work.
Kyle has blamed / credited you. And keep me honest of having the idea for the podcast and doing some of the video stuff. What do you think is the next step that you guys are going to work on?
Yeah, I think video is going to be ramping up. We're going to, we don't have exact plans yet, but there's a lot of talk. We would like to make full on series type stuff. I'm really pushing for an animated series. Like, I think that our audience would love their own South Park / Rick and Morty / The Simpsons or something like that,
or to bring the Christian cinematic universe to life.
Yeah,
because that was a great series of Photoshops and things that you guys pulled off in that.
Yeah, I would love to do a fake Bible Man reboot trailer. That's one of my dream videos to do if we have some budget.
So terrible.
But yeah, I think we would love to get into kind of the way that National Lampoon went. We'd love to get into movies and other mediums, as the bee grows. And there's a lot of growth behind the scenes happening, and we're trying to figure out what to do with all of it, because we've always been such a tiny operation. It's like, what do you do with all that, and how do you not grow too fast to where like too many new people are showing up and nobody knows who the other person is or what they're doing.
Yeah, you lose sight of the mission and what's going on.
Right, and I'm so new to I've been working alone most of my life since when I was like in my early 20s, I just kind of became freelance and just did freelance work most of my life. So this is the first time I've worked with other people in a long time on a team, and I love it. But it's tricky. Like, I'm having to come up with work for me, but also like make sure everybody that's hired has work to do, and we're keeping everything on this schedule and stuff. So,
do you miss Adam Ford?
Well, the myth, that's the big myth, right? Because Adam Ford. He's still part owner of the Babylon Bee. He's still on our Slack channel. We talk to him all the time. And it's funny, the idea that he's been abandoned and he's rolling in his grave right now, even though he's still alive.
Yeah.
We have heard about the Slack channel. I think you already knew, but I recently heard about it, that Seth Dillon would start pitching ideas, and for the longest time, maybe his chops weren't quite up, and he got better at it.
Seth told us that he pitched for nearly a year before he got anything published. And
he got a thumbs up from Kyle.
He's like, Ethan pitched like 30 ideas, and we used like half of them. I pitched for a year, and they barely used one.
That was one thing my first time when I met Kyle. I was like, hey, I'll send you a bunch of ideas. So I had like 30 ideas, and I think like 10 of them got used. And now that I've been with the Bee and seen the amount of pitches we get, like if you've messaged me, I try to respond to as many messages as I can. These days it's hard, but I do have a default. If you pitch me headlines directly, I just don't answer, because I just can't answer them all. If I did answer you, I was feeling particularly sympathetic that day. because I have a very long response if I have the energy. And that response is, if you look at the writers on the Babylon Bee, almost all of our successful writers either went through our headline forum, they're a subscriber, and they can go in there and they can pitch and pitch and pitch. And if their headlines rise to the top and get thumbs up, they'll get noticed. If they get a few published, that might get them hired on as kind of a little part-time thing. And the other way is, you look at a lot of our top writers, Frank Fleming, I believe Joel was doing that, Barry, we got another guy, Doctor. All these guys had their own stuff going on, their own website with their own satire on it. They were already doing it. They had worked, so they had a body of work and had already worked out the kinks of what's, there's a lot. That's the thing. You submit your first 30 headlines if you've never written comedy. It's kind of like the first time you use Photoshop. It's all lens flares and gradients, and like you need to get yourself past that stage before you start pitching.
Yes. Everyone's pitching about AOC over and over.
And Frank Fleming is, I think, one of my favorite writers on y'all's.
He's amazing.
On y'all's forum, because you can almost tell when it's a Frank thing, because it's not like right on the nose, but it barely missed the nose. And and Frank does a phenomenal job. He's got some great stuff out there. So one of the other things that you've been able to do while you focused on the Bee is you have been able to channel your passion for GK Chesterton into a brand new book. Will you tell us a little bit about that project, and when is that actually going to get released, and talk about some of the hurdles you've had in publishing that?
Yeah, so ever since I've done the Babylon Bee podcast, I've done a lot of Chesterton quoting, and so now we actually have a thing that pops up every time I say his name.
GK Chesterton.
Right. And the guy that made that as a fan now works for us, Brandon.
Oh, cool.
So he does all our, if you've watched our videos, there's a certain point at which our videos suddenly look really good. And that's partly because we suddenly invested in way nicer cameras and stuff, but it's also because Brandon came in here, got all our lighting set up, and he became our video guy and just killing it. And he's hilarious. You should see the skit that came out today. We just released a sketch where he plays a waiter. He throws me into a table. I think it's one of the funniest things we've done. What were we talking about?
Chesterton.
Oh, Chesterton. Yeah, Chesterton. So I constantly now get emails asking, where should I start with Chesterton? And it's a complicated answer because none of his books are very inviting. If you read his detective novels, it's not really the best place to start. They're okay. They're nice, but like it's not like real good meaty Chesterton. Orthodoxy is great, but it's a hard book to start with. You get lost. And the best way to start Chesterton is essays, because he's an essayist first and foremost. That's how he wrote. And so I would basically send people a list of essays, and I'd always go find them, find the link, paste it into this email, little explanation, this one. And like I started doing that so often, I was like, I should just make a document up. And, so that whenever somebody asked me this, I'll just have this nice PDF ready to go. And as I was working on it, I started going like, this feels like a real book. And then I started thinking like, one thing it really makes Chesterton hard is he references a lot of things from his time or from like classical education that most people just don't know. Like, so I decided, what if I go through and footnote everything that confuses me? So I went ahead and did that, and I put 14 chapters into a book. I did like 400 footnotes in the thing, and I did a full introduction for each one. I did an illustration for each chapter. And then I kind of talked about, I did an introduction of the book, and then an afterword about, my love of Chesterton came from not just like reading him, but when I read him, I wanted to discuss him with somebody. And that became a thing where me and Doug Tnaple, when I moved to California, we started a group of guys who I love their minds, creative guys who think about theology, apologetics, meaning. These essays are such great launching points for awesome conversations. The ones that you like really cherish having with people, but they kind of just, you wait for them to come, and these are, for me, I'm like waiting people to stop talking about Star Wars or the Marvel universe. I want to talk about these ideas that Chesterton talks about. So this is like become this launching point for these awesome conversations over cigars and whiskey at Doug's house. And the group became like, I think probably our biggest day. We had 35 people or something there on one day, but we had just all these guys who would come. Awesome mix of like all these artists and people, directors and stuff that would come out. And then when I joined the Babylon Bee, we started a new Chesterton group out here where we live more out in the Inland Empire area. And and that group has grown too. I mean, it's this weird thing where like reading Chesterton seems to just attract the right kind of people. Like they have hungry minds. They're not too uptight about like, you know, because we smoke cigars. So like there's a certain amount of not overly legalistic. They like whimsical. They like humor because that's Chesterton. There's this whole thing. It seems to weed out the people you just don't want to be around. And like everybody that joins is great. So like we have this awesome group of dudes. We meet every Wednesday night and we smoke cigars and we read 2 chapters of Chesterton. And it's my favorite night of the week. So I talk about that in there. And I can announce on your show right now, I haven't even really said this. I might have mentioned it in a tweet in a reply to somebody, but I'm waiting to do like an official announcement until at least the paperback is completely released. Right now, there's some weird glitch with Amazon. I've had a huge amount of trouble because it's public domain stuff, but it's not an actual public domain book. It's my own collection of essays. But I've managed with the help of the Chesterton Society to get Amazon to like recognize the book as legal to print. That was a huge, long process. It is now available on Kindle. So if you go on Amazon and look up, it's called Chesterton's Gateway. That's the other thing I'd realized nobody had ever done a Chesterton primer book. And that's everybody's asking. Like people want to get into them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They don't know where to start. And there's no book about that. Like, so that was one thing for me. I was like, I'm going to do the Chesterton primer book. Another thing I did in it is he has these wall of text paragraphs in some of his essays that just go on for pages. Yeah. So I broke up those paragraphs into easier paragraphs. I just did things like that. And I just picked, and it also is just kind of broad scope of the main ideas of Chesterton. Chesterton's Gate, what he says about wonder and pride, about the democracy of the dead, fairyland, just kind of these basic idea. If you learn these concepts, paradox, these things Chesterton teaches, it's going to be a really good way to kind of prepare you for reading Chesterton outside of it. So anyway, if you go on Amazon, look up Chesterton's Gateway by Ethan Nicolle. You can get the Kindle version right now. It's up.
Yeah.
If you live outside of the U.S., you can actually get the paperback if it's in your area, but you can't get it from the U.S. yet. So if you're in the U.S. and you look, it'll say it's $50 because it's actually one of those weird bootleg websites that maybe they'll print it in another country where it's available and then they'll ship it in really expensive shipping, or you might not get anything. So don't buy that $50 one. That's not legit.
Okay, because that was, my wife was looking at it and we talked, and I'd like to have the actual physical book. You know, yeah, because when the tyrannical government comes and takes or wipes out the internet. No, when
they're gonna take your guns and then your books.
Just take my guns and my books. No, so we looked at it and she was gonna get it for me, and she was like, "Babe, do you think you could read this on your iPad?" And I was like, I mean, I guess if I have to. She goes, because the book is $50. It's like there's no way.
Yeah, not that's not for me. So there's some weird glitch that I actually got on the phone at Amazon with a person, and I guess they have some issue there where like new people that are publishing directly through Amazon, for some reason their page is not updating in America, and there's some reason it's like getting blocked, and there's no way to tell when it's going to come up, and she couldn't give me any answers. So she said it will come at some point, but we don't know when, and that was weeks ago she said that. So yeah, I have no idea if or when it'll ever come up.
When you click on the images of the book, it'll show you the front cover, which is very brilliantly drawn. And then if you look at the back cover, right up above the ISBN, it says $14.99.
Yeah, it's going to be a little paperback.
Like, it's not. What the heck? So, but no, I'm very excited for the release of that. Now, I've got In the Defense of Sanity, which is a collection of Chesterton's essays. Now, we've read Cheese.
Yeah,
and
Chasing Your Hat.
Chasing or Running After One's Own Hat. If we were going to start our audience off with a Chesterton essay, what would you recommend that we did, if not one of those two?
Those are both great. Those are both in my book. My favorite, it's really simple and cute, but it's the introduction to Tremendous Trifles. He tells this little fairy tale.
Tremendous
pride.
Trifles.
And that's one of my favorites.
Do you know what it's called?
It's called Tremendous Trifles. So the book is called Tremendous Trifles, and then the very first chapter, which is the introduction to that book, is called Tremendous Trifles.
It's just
well.
called
So
Tremendous Trifles. I don't know if it's in this one.
Yeah, it is hysterical. I think
it's not in that one.
That's so sad.
That was the book I would recommend to people originally. Like if they ask, like that's my
Defensive
favorite
Sanity?
essay collection there is.
Yeah.
But it's still there's some really tough ones in there, some really long ones in there.
There are.
And also like it's not heavily footnoted. So I always wanted that like spoon feeding Chesterton book.
Yeah.
I'm also doing the audiobook too. I'm almost done.
Is Nick Offerman gonna voice it?
No, it's my voice. But it's a little weird and funny because like I'm reading Chesterton to you and then all of a sudden you stop and go, all right, footnote, because what the heck was that? And then I'll just like go
that's
through it and
great.
go, at least I think that's exactly whatever. We'll go back to the book now, and then I just keep reading the book.
You are right. We talked about the cheese one and the chasing after one's hat. That I was sitting there in bed giggling reading it, and I'd turn to my wife and try to tell her about it. Zero interest.
No.
That when you're telling someone about it, they really have to understand what Chesterton is, and there's a
you gotta
lot
get
of explaining. I was concerned when we talked about talking about what essay to pick to talk. I know I'm being very redundant, but to really discuss one of the essays, it's going to take some time.
Yeah, and like when you're telling the story of reading the essay to your wife, well, when we're talking about Chesterton's theory on opening a drawer, that you have to imagine that it's somebody that, there's a dragon that's pulling the drawer back. My wife is like, that would just frustrate me if you were standing there and be like, oh, pretend it's a dragon. She'd be like, I would just throw at you whatever came out of the drawer. Yeah, well, that's probably true. But that's sort of his genius, is making all of these things that we find very irritating parts of the day, and sort of the wonder and whimsy with which he looks at the world. And I think with your animations that it's and illustrations, that's
I'm excited about that.
An
That'd
awesome
be
thing.
great.
I'm very excited about that, because we've got a lot of students that want to get into Chesterton. They're learning about philosophy and they want to know, is there a Christian view on these things? And I think very few people have done it as well as him. So as soon as that gets remedied, I'm going to order a few of those copies and pass it out. Now, you say you're doing the audiobook for it. In the Brave Ollie Possum audiobook, you did a bunch of different voices. You've got special voices for the Glorch, for each one of the animals, for Ollie and Ollie as a possum. Are you trying to, and I know there's I think maybe only one recording of GK Chesterton's voice. Are you using the high screechy British accent whenever you're reading these essays? No?
No, I just do my voice for the essays. But if he quotes somebody, then I will usually do some kind of a voice to just differentiate. And it'll usually be an obnoxious British voice or something. But yeah, that's about it. That's about it for voices in this one.
Right on.
Well, we are nearing our time. We are actually past it, so we want to be cognizant of your time. But we wrap up all of our interviews unless you've got one more.
No. Let's do it. Let's enter into controlled rowdiness.
One more time. There you go.
So controlled rowdiness is a
I'm not
segment we
doing
do
this
at the end of
bit.
our show where we just ask you some rapid fire questions. You answer with the first thing that comes to your head. There is no right answer, but there are several wrong answers. So be careful. Don't step on any of those landmines.
Alrighty.
Danley, do you want to get us going?
Yes.
Okay.
Batman, Iron Man, Kyle Man. Fight, kiss, team up.
Kiss. I want to see all three of them making out.
Well, this is you.
Yeah. You gotta pick
Oh,
one to
I
fight.
have to kiss them? I
Yeah.
thought I
No.
had to decide what they're doing.
You gotta fight
kiss,
one, kiss
or-
one,
there you go.
and team up with one.
Oh, so one of them and I fight them or kiss them.
Yep.
Or
And then
up with
team
them.
up.
Yep.
I'm already teamed up with Kyle Mann.
Yep. But you do have the chance to be subversive and choose something that everyone's not expecting.
Okay.
Because I don't know that you want to
Your
fight
choice.
Batman or Spider-Man.
I thought it was Iron Man.
No, Batman
Sure.
and Spider-Man. Yeah, sure, Iron
doesn't
Man. Why
matter.
not? Yeah.
Oh, did I hear it? I thought I heard Iron Man in there.
I may have said Iron Man.
Spider-Man. If I could team up with Spider-Man, that would make my son's day. He'd freak out. So
Okay.
So fighting
That-
or kissing Batman or Kyle Man.
Oh, so I have to pick one for each one. This is
Yep.
complicated.
Now you're down to
Yeah.
we're down to fight and kiss.
So I have to kiss one of them.
Yep.
Okay, actually, I might kiss Spider-Man because he has a mask covering his entire face. So that
That seems
Solid.
right.
Good choice.
is less. Yeah. So then I have to fight. I don't know. They're all gonna kick my butt because Kyle's been in like taking MMA classes lately. So, so I'll just getting punched by Batman would be a good way to die, probably. So I guess.
Well, Batman wouldn't kill you. That's his code.
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
Batman
he
wouldn't.
Probably wouldn't. He wouldn't mean to. I just would die from being punched.
Just one punch. He'd be like, I didn't realize.
I'm so sorry, Ethan.
He's like, I was only giving like 30% on that.
Okay, next.
Okay, so if there is a resurrection of the Audio Mullet podcast, if you guys are able to do that, is there any chance at all that we're going to hear a return of Mike Nelson?
I do believe at some point Mike will come back out of the woodwork. I think at some point he will. I know he passionately wants to. He was very sad about what happened with us, and he misses it. So I do hope to at least do some kind of a show or podcast with Mike in the future. I miss him very dearly. That is one of the things that makes that show hard for me, because like to me, what made the show was that trifecta of me, Mike, and Doug, and so. I don't know if there's anything that can compare to that for me. That's the triangle.
That makes sense. Where did you source the picture of AOC getting tied up with her shoelace? Either you're great at Photoshop, or there's a picture of her grimacing a little bit.
Gosh, I cannot remember, but I remember thinking I want this to look like a bad Photoshop. So that was a bad version of bad for me, because I did it really fast, but I'm guessing I got a picture of somebody tying their shoes, and then I added her face, and I probably did have to do some altering to make it grimacing.
Yeah.
She probably was like kind of like angry looking, and I just added squished the face around.
Some confusion.
Yeah. And then just went way overboard with the shoelaces, like way longer than any shoelace in the world.
So do you remember the old MTV celebrity death matches?
Yeah.
All right, so
I haven't thought about that in so long.
Celebrity death match. We're gonna put Mike Naraki is the referee, and the celebrity death match is between Doug TeNapel and Phil Vischer. Who wins?
Oh gosh.
And how? And how?
Yeah, and how?
That's a big part of it.
Yeah, what's the finishing move? Or does a bear come in and just ruin everything?
I do get the sense that Doug TeNapel's more bark than bite, and I could see Phil Vischer having this secret like. Because I think he seems to have this like hidden like sort of like Antifa warrior inside of him.
He might
have a secret hidden bloodlust in him that we don't know about.
He pulls out Larry's hairbrush and beats him with it.
Shoves him in some kind of like, I don't know, some kind of carrot grater. I don't know who knows. Yeah, I have this feeling that there's a. Also, I think that Phil has more intrinsic hatred towards Doug, not just for his politics, but because he bastardized VeggieTales, and so he wants to get back, almost like a Taken sort of thing. Like he's Liam Neeson and Doug is the Russian prostitute, the pimp. You know, like he pimped out and turned VeggieTales into a woman of the night.
Well,
So,
I
personal.
I can see that episode already. Doug's in the ring, not really caring a whole lot.
Yeah, trying to draw Earthworm
Phil's
Jim in the corner and just be
cracking
left
his
alone.
knuckles.
Yep.
Well, I understand that you were a big fan of Norm Macdonald.
Mm-hmm.
What was your favorite moment of his? Whether it was a bit or an appearance or whatever.
I mean, I just love the guy, man. He's a person that I could I go down the rabbit hole many times watching Norm Macdonald YouTube videos.
Me too.
Probably my favorite moment that's just quintessential. Probably a lot of people will answer this, but this is the one that made me fall in love with him. Was him on The View talking about when he kept bringing up Bill Clinton.
We watched that today.
They did not want him to.
Yeah,
his relentlessness. It's just like it's so freaking funny, and that's him on the fly, you know.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
that's one of my favorite. That and the moth joke if you do the audiobook version of the moth joke.
Is it even longer?
I believe it's the longest one I remember there being,
my
but
gosh,
it goes on for a long time.
my boss Gregory Olenovich, I hate him.
It's a doc. My doc, I says. That was my favorite part. He always says, I says.
And his wife, who's a battle axe.
Yeah.
You dirty dog.
Well, rest well, Norm Macdonald. I also am a big fan. I was very, very, very bummed out. But
that was not what I was expecting to hear today.
Yeah, no kidding, man. And so, like, relatively speaking, pretty young at 61.
No, I remember thinking of him like, because you have all these comedians that become these old guys, and they, you get the old version of that comedian, and he was just headed into that territory of being an old guy comedian. Like, because in my generation, I think of Bob Hope as this old guy. I mean, he wasn't always an old guy. So I was thinking my kids are going to have old Norm Macdonald, and I think that would probably be like his stride. Like, he's meant to be an old guy comic.
Yeah, he was
the
old
world.
at
The world
30.
was robbed of the old guy comic.
I agree. I can also see him as like a Mel Brooks, now. Which, speaking of which, next lightning round question: what's your favorite Mel Brooks movie?
You know what? I saw the most when I was a lot younger, so I don't really have I don't have one. I haven't watched one in so long. I have to admit, I'm not up on my Mel Brooks.
Well, hey, thank you again, man. We're both big fans.
Yeah.
You're awesome. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah. Thank you, guys.
All right, have a good one.
Have a good one.
Ethan freaking Nicolle.
Yeah,
That was fun.
it was very fun.
It's a lot of information from Ethan, like why he wrote the books, what was the inspiration behind him. I liked him getting into talking about his relationship with Malachi, who is his younger brother that he
That's
wrote
my
the Axe Cop
favorite.
series with.
I love that. That's such a cool story.
And there's a lot of stuff that we didn't get into that we could have as it relates specifically to the Babylon Bee, where, he not only has taken their stuff to a different level, but if you look at the stuff he was talking about, the animation, the stuff that they're doing on video and all that, it's taken them to a place where satire sites before have never really gone. And some of that's due to the medium, but also it's because the sort of environment that they foster allows them to continue to be creative, right? We don't see the Onion doing stuff that's outside of...
I wanted to ask him about that.
Yeah, but we don't really see them doing a lot of stuff that's outside of the norm for them. They stick to news. They do news stories, and their videos are like the fake news desk. And even with the Onion movie, it was a lot of like just made up satirical news. Whereas the Bee is getting into stuff that is in a different realm that's really trying to speak to
It's younger.
their audience.
Yeah, it's
right.
younger with the animation. That's something that the Onion's not doing. And also Elon Musk likes the Babylon Bee
He does.
and not the Onion,
So
which is what I wanted to ask him about, and I totally forgot.
There's a big following of the Bee by people that you would not necessarily consider their audience, right? Because their audience is primarily, when we think about it, we think of it
they're
about...
not shooting for genius, billionaire, playboy, philanthropists.
No, Tony Stark is not who like you think about with the Babylon Bee. But one of the things about their humor is that so much of it is based in truth, and I love, especially the stuff that they do that pokes fun at Christians, because like Thor Ramsey said when he was on our shows, you can't satirize something that you don't love, and that's one of the issues.
Which is what Norm said.
And, well, that's one of the issues that comes up with things like The Onion whenever they talk about Christians, is they don't really have a love for Christ. They don't have a love for the church. And so everything comes off as condescending and mean. And the guys that work for the Bee have a myriad of political preferences. They're not just a group of conservative guys that makes fun of the left. They're not just a bunch of people that are in the Trump support camp and all that. They're a really diverse group. And if you look at the individual writers, if you know who they are, and they do a great job of protecting the identity of their writers so that they don't get outed. Because so many of them, if people found out that they worked for the Bee, wouldn't get work anymore. And they do a great job of protecting their writers. But if you know who they are, you can see that they're kind of all over the map when it comes to their political affiliations, but their voice as the Babylon Bee is directly pointed at the ridiculous nature of culture, which I think is phenomenal.
Yeah.
And Seth has done a great job in nurturing a creative atmosphere and environment that allowed them to grow more than just the funny satire on a website to now the guys are having their individual books and works published, and on top of that, they're being able to branch out into things like the animation, which are ridiculous, and the skits and things that they're doing, as well as the podcast and other things, which are not things that we're seeing happen in a lot of other forums.
Hey, did I do good?
Yeah, you did a good job.
Can I have my Cheetos back?
No, you can't have your Cheetos back because you're going to eat them into the microphone. We respect our audience. Hey, guys, thank you very much for watching our interview with Ethan Nicolle. Make sure that you check out in the show notes everything that Ethan's got going on. He had to bug out. We had kept him just a little longer than what we had anticipated.
Well, hey.
But the links to his books, you can follow him on Twitter and Facebook. There is a link in the show notes to where you can subscribe to the Babylon Bee. Guys like Ethan and the people at the Bee, if you really like what they're doing, they are, as if you've heard the Seth Dillon episode, you know that they are fighting some censorship stuff right now. And so the best thing that you can do is to go and be a subscriber. There's different levels that you can subscribe at. As little as $5 a month will allow you not only the opportunity to get big exclusives, you get to hear the subscriber portion of their podcast, but you get to be part of the headline forum to actually get to pitch headlines that Ethan, the guys at the Bee, will read and have the opportunity, if you're doing well enough on pitching the headlines, to potentially become a writer for the Bee and get paid to write comedy.
Yeah.
Like, subscribe.
Give me my Cheetos.
This is Ethan Nicolle from the Babylon Bee, and this is the reason why you should never listen to the Reverend and the Reprobate. Reprobate. Because it's hard to say reprobate.
Yep.
Now, I think that you guys are big fans of Dan Coates.
Yes, we're familiar with Dan Coates.
Dan is watching and waiting for us to be done here, and I think he's ready to go.